As the consensus and clamor for state police grows across the country, it is opportune to address the fears being expressed by some stakeholders against the decentralization of civil security in Nigeria. The idea of decentralizing police in Nigeria is so that each of the 36 states can establish its own security apparatus. Governors or lead representatives have argued that the federating units, which is actually 36 states, should have control over their own security apparatus, even when there is still a federal police. And the governors have very compelling reasons to ask for the decentralization of the Nigerian police force as presently constituted. They, as chief security officers of their own states, more or less bear huge responsibilities for the upkeep and maintenance of the police in the form of logistics, allowances, and other forms of assistance. But they have no control or power over these police commands, whose men take orders specifically from the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Besides, the current security challenges compel fresh concerns for the quest for state police. I'm Odiawa AI, and the show is Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue. With me on the show
is February. Do well to subscribe to all our social media channels. Join us on the next phase of the show.
So, Favor, it's been this case of insecurity which has now dictated the heightening concerns for state policing, which has been argued a long time coming in the National Assembly up until now. What do you have for us and viewers out there?
Okay, I think insecurity is a common word in Nigeria. In fact, we are doing a free course on insecurity. And the sad part of it is that we have an existing police force and nothing seems to be happening. But before we talk about state policing, let's talk about the Nigerian police force, its existence, and why it is not functioning in the face of violence.
Well, the Nigerian police force, for any establishment to function optimally, it should be a case of how well motivated are they? Have they been really treated properly with incentives? Because if we look at it, we see our normal police officers on the road. The morale is really, really dampened. Why? Because of the tools in which they have to actually showcase their constitutional responsibility, which is to safeguard lives and also protect properties. You ask a police officer to come over to meet you at a particular point in time. Why? Because there are some security concerns and he can't get there. Why? Because he has a flat tire, or probably he doesn't have some fuel, or maybe the engine has knocked. Then even when he gets there to combat those who are actually constituting that mayhem, are armed or furnished with sophisticated weapons, and they are still using rusty guns that haven't been oiled in months. Now, that's another question now. Now, there's no how we'll not begin to talk about state policing if we don't know the origins concerning the Nigerian police, which is now suffering lapses now. For instance, now we have close to 226 million people as we speak in Nigeria, still counting, because I want to believe that there should be some mothers
in childbirth.
Thank you. There should be some increasing childbirths now as we speak now. Now, even with the increasing childbirths, close to 370-something police officers isn't enough to deal with the millions or hundreds of millions of Nigerians which are still increasing or adding up to the population. How well equipped are they? We'll take a cue from the British police forces. You don't see them chasing people about, just as we have our police officers here. May the devil bless you when the Nigerian police chases you and catches up with you. No, the British police will practically come over and, excuse me, sir, they hand you a ticket. And then you're answerable and you must be accountable. Now, not to deviate or digress. Now, coming over to state policing, it actually began with the Hausa police, who were nabbed by Lieutenant Glover, a one-time military British governor here in the Lagos colony. We also have the Royal Niger Constabulary. We also have the Niger Coast Constabulary. Now, all these bodies which I have just mentioned came on board together as at the 1800s to form the Nigerian police as at 1930. Now, the Nigerian police now over time was answerable to the local authorities. Why? Because of they making sure that they are grasped with intel within their locale, which now transcended to regionalism at the time when we had this regional form of government. They were answerable to their regions. Why? Because of who they are. We have the Hausa Constabulary also on his own part. Now, these bodies which I just mentioned, I forgot to even talk about the 30-man consular guard, which was aside from Lagos also. Now, with all these bodies coming on board now, it gave effect or gave birth to the Nigerian police as at 1930. Now, constitutional rule now, which stipulates or says in section 214 to 216, states that there will be a national police known as the Nigerian police. But now as it speaks now, with the lapses which I mentioned earlier on from their guns or their mobility, even the bulletproof vest, these things are not making them active enough to take care of the internal security, where they have to combat bandits with sophisticated weapons.
Okay, you're removing one part of the shortcomings of the police force, which is corruption. I will say what someone said, that if he is being faced by the Nigerian police and armed robbers, that he will quietly run into the hands of armed robbers, because you're going to be more secure then. And okay, going over to the next question, why the clamor for the state policing? Like, is it the best replacement? For goodness sake, we are talking about a national police body being incompetent. Why do we think that bringing it down to the state policing will be more sufficient? Why the quest for that?
Well, whether we like it or not, there are bandit-prone regions now, particularly North Central, Northeast, and Northwest. The popular Sambisa forest is also there. Now, these particular areas cannot be penetrated by the police. Why? Because they are not conversant with that locale. You take, for instance, you're taking someone from the Southwest and redeploying him to the Northeast or North Central. He's not conversant with the language. Where you go speaking the English language, or maybe you are even heavily provincialized in your accent. And you begin to speak to a locale in that particular region, he or she won't pick what you're trying to say. So language barrier now is another factor when it comes to having to establish state police. We have the likes of Amotekun. Amotekun is dominant in the Southwest. We have the likes of the Benue Guard. That one is dominant in North Central, particularly the Middle Belt. Then we now have the likes of Ebiweagu, which is actually dominant in the Southeast. Now, all these regions are all bandit insecurity prone regions. But the police on his own part, like I began by saying, you cannot redeploy a Southwesterner who is not conversant with the language of that of the Northwest to begin to speak fluently. You cannot get intel unless maybe you have a spy on ground. So a situation whereby the need for state police now to actually be set up now becomes germane, in the sense that locals who are conversant with the terrain will actually be armed with information and know how to pass intel. And every tribe actually has its own, should I say, deep mother tongue. They can decide to use that deep mother tongue as a passcode to pass information, so bandits don't understand. It's like when the Americans want to say Bravo Alpha Tango. So this should also be taken into cognizance also, based on security strategy. Okay,
so I believe from what you said, you mentioned the Amotekun and the Ebubago and the Benue Guard as well. The major problem we're facing in Nigeria, one of the popular insecurity, is banditry. And this has been the reason for food insecurity. Farmers are no longer going to farm because you have to pay ransoms, or let's say money, to bandits. So with this, the likes of Amotekun, Ebubago, and the Benue Guard, will they help in the problem of food insecurity?
Frankly speaking, it could have never have come at a better time. Why? Because when food is scarce, the available ones become expensive. Now, even the expatriates who are investors, who actually ought to come in to invest, no longer come in. Why? Because of threat to life from these bandits. And it doesn't make for a healthy climate. So the likes of Amotekun will only play the roles of sheriffs we have in the Western world here. Why? Because they are the security apparatus closest to the people. The Nigerian police on its own part, there are some terrains they cannot enter. Why? Because they are not furnished with those apparatus or tools. Let me put it that way. Sometimes or oftentimes there are some communities that are not even motorable. You need bikes to get there. These locals should have their bikes also to be able to get to that place. And even upon getting there, I mentioned the issue of language barrier. They will be able to get intel from those people. Why? Because they are conversant with the dialects, they are conversant with the terrain.
So I still believe that there is some loopholes that has to do with the state policing, but maybe in the process of this conversation, we are still going to touch that and talk about that. Then going over to the fears that have been had for this state policing, people have fears that the state governors are going to hijack it for their political purposes, to fight their oppositions and stay in power as long as they want. Do you share similar fears?
Well, it's a two-way thing. If we look at it, security concerns are paramount.
Okay.
Political affairs are also paramount. But you will not place the pressing need or relegate the pressing need to the bottom over selfish interest.
Yeah.
Politics is all about interest. But now, politics has to do with how do you have to serve the people with your manifesto. That's another thing. Okay. You won't let your selfish interest overshadow when it comes to security concerns. For those who are actually advocating that, I want to say that they are selfish, and the selfishness is in caps. The point whereby people are dying daily,
yes,
or dying weekly,
yeah,
and you're saying that, oh, the politicians might hijack it, it doesn't arise. Why? Because fine, I said it side by side, without a doubt, state governors have turned themselves into tin-top emperors, whereby they become overlords within their locale or domain in which they reside as chief security officers for the state. Now, it's no news that they've employed the use of military or the thugs to execute their ill acts.
Okay.
Now, bringing in the state police, the fears that the state's governor might want to influence the decision of the state police, I won't say it will arise. Why? Because constitutionally speaking, everybody has his own role stipulated in constitution, which is an established law of the land. Now, peradventure, that constitution has to be altered. That particular governor has abused his immunity clause and will definitely be answerable when he or she is out of office. So the roles of the governor will be defined in the constitution, and the roles of the state police organization will be defined in the constitution. There are limits. That's why that's why we have what they call checks and balances. There's a limit to which a particular body within the governmental cycle can go. There's a limit to which the governor himself can go.
Okay. So you're saying that if they should put these limitations and rules, that hopefully that the governors are going to work towards them. But my own 2 cents concerning this, the issue of state policing is that I won't totally trash the people's fears. Yes, we've known the usual attitude of politicians in Nigeria, trying to hijack things, monopolize them, and use them to fight oppositions. That's why I will key into what some people said about going for regional policing instead, or maybe community policing, which they believe is even much more effective. Because drawing from what you've been saying so far, I would say that you are even directing mainly to community policing. When you do community policing, that's where you find people that are speaking your dialect and everything. Most people, like the Ebubagwa and the Omotekun you're talking about, if you look, there might be, I think they are regional police, yes. If you look, there might be like oppositions, maybe you're not from my place or this or that. But when you do community policing, these people, the person that is coming from that particular a particular community, and aside being conversant with the area, I think that they also know when a stranger comes into that very community, and that way security is kind of assured. And concerning why I also opt for regional policing is that leaving the police system in the hand of one man is a dangerous thing to do. But when you put it on a regional standard, and there are opposition in different governorship, this person is from Abuja, this person is from PDP, APC, I don't think that there will be a time that these people will come together. Let me take the Southeast for an instance. There are 5 states there, so there are automatically going to be 5 governors. So, and they are from different parties. I think it is going to be a hard thing for that system to be hijacked, because there is never going to be a time that those 5 governors are going to come together and try to hijack the police system. And that being said, okay, we go over to the next question, which is the implementation of these particular policies. We have seen so many proposed bills in Nigeria, like they never ever came to happen again. They lost in Neverland. We have seen so many of them. So my question is what do you think about the implementation? Do you think it's something that is going to come, and is it going to come quickly?
Well, as a matter of necessity, it has to come quickly because it has always been at the front burner of the National Assembly. Okay. So speedily, it has to pass through the phases of the first reading, second reading, and third reading, up until it journeys its race down to the chief executive. And also a consensus also needs to be arrived at, not just on the hands of the National Assembly alone, the chief executive and stakeholders. And stakeholders now also who need to be on board now as regards this consensus ought to be retired security personnel. We're talking about the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the NSCDC, or even the police officers themselves also, because they will also, with their expertise, come on board and know where lapses need to be corrected. Because when these people operate, they operate with intel. What kind of intel now should be adopted? You can't compare the security situation as at 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or 3 decades ago with the security now. Because, for instance, now, when the police were actually operating as at the 1800s, they were not using the 9mm then. They were making use of the double barrel, which all those old soldiers who used to brag about. But now, compare security now with this particular thing. You can actually deploy weapons with a click of a button. So warfare is different. Security now, which needs to be addressed now, is different. So these are things which the stakeholders need to bring on board to checkmate all these things. And then secondly, also when it gets to the National Assembly, as we discussed earlier on, the roles of the state police should be constitutionally defined. They should be independent on their own. And it shouldn't be a history of, upon introducing plausible policies, it's never executed, it never raises its head out of water. It should actually be, as a matter of necessity, speedily implemented. There's no time, because the more we delay concerning the establishment of the state policing and the actual documentation as regards their constitutional responsibilities as defined as it is now, if you go to section 214 to 216, that of the Nigerian police is actually stipulated there. So that of the state police also should actually be also stipulated there. So as a matter of urgency, to checkmate every form of insecurity, loss of lives, loss of food and the lots, the farmers not being able to get to the farm to make sure that food is available for the populace at large. All these things need to be taken into cognizance.
Okay, so like you said, it's a matter of urgency. We don't have so much time at our side, so it's actually a necessity. So we hope that this bill that has been proposed for state policing make it to being a law finally at the end of the day.
Conclusively, while we are aware of these potential pitfalls, as I and Favor here have discussed, we believe that the merits of having state police far outweigh the demerits and the Constitution, which should be amended to reflect the current reality, which is insecurity plaguing the nation at large. We align ourselves with the strong view that the country is overdue for the establishment of a state police. I'm Odiawa AI, and the show has been Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue.
I'm Favor. Do well to subscribe to all our social media platforms. Thank you.